start talking. So thanks very much, Beth. It's always a pleasure to have you on. So Beth, introduce Beth.
I shall. And what I will do is I will actually share my screen. So hopefully let me know and confirm that all peeps can actually see that.
Okay.
Is that all good? That's seen?
I can see my screen. Can everyone else see that all right?
Good. Oh, yes. Oh, wonderful. Brilliant. Oh, wonderful. Excellent. Excellent. So, right. Yes, the light and fluffy topic of demonic possession. As you know, my name is Beth Darlington. A couple of people, and it's interesting as CJ has asked, have I seen somebody who's ever been possibly demonically possessed? Or no, I don't think I have. Taken over by possibly something, I don't know. The jury is still out on that one. Reasons for researching this particular topic actually came from my own fear. I was involved in a documentary which was called, I know this is Latin, so apologies, grew up with Latin previously, so the pronunciation may be a bit dodgy. It's called In Tenebris, which is, I believe, is Latin for in darkness, and it was all about the dark side of the paranormal, so suicide, murders, all this kind of thing, Ouija boards and demonic possession was part of that. And it really challenged me because in my earlier days when I was out looking at cases, I wouldn't go into locations if I thought I might be taken over by something, particularly something negative. So it was that whole release of control type feeling that feared me. So obviously, as you do, with an investigator mind, it's like, well, okay, if this is something could possibly happen, in my belief at the time, then I need to want to research the possibility of things that can help explain it first, because I'd want to know. And that's what this happened from. So it actually stemmed from my own fear of having it. Now, I'm not a Christian or Catholic or any a sort of strong religious belief in that way. So technically, if that's the case, it should not happen to me anyway, but still the fear was very much there. Some places can be really spooky. So I decided, I want to be able to find this out for myself. So my own fear actually drove me to do my own research. So, and it's based on some wonderful information from people would know of Kieran O'Keefe. He does a lot of information regarding this particular topic. And it spawned from there and my experiences and my thoughts and my own research on top of that as well. So that's what we're going to go through today. So, tonight, I should say as well. So, right. Obviously, there's going to be a couple of images that will be probably a little bit disturbing, and also some video that's going to be probably not so great. So, again, I say, viewer discretion is advised. I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable if there's things that come up, but just letting everybody know there's going to be a couple of images that might be a bit intense. Later on, that might be not so comfortable to watch. So if that's the case, by all means, switch audio off, switch video off, and until you feel comfortable as well. So don't upset anybody in that way. Yes.
Beth, just before we go on, can you turn up the volume? Is there any way you can move your mic closer or just turn up?
Oh, okay. Yep. Cool. Maybe if I move up closer. Hello.
Thanks so much.
Does that help?
Is that better, everyone?
It's gone on silent. I must look into my crystal ball. What's the CJ one?
No, that's it. Sorry, carry on, please.
Okay, that's cool. That's excellent.
They were messaging me in chat. Sorry.
Oh, very good. That's good. Yeah. Okay. So I do. Yeah. Okay. So wonderful. I shall talk a little bit more louder as well. My connection, internet, of course, is playing wonderfully well tonight. So apologies if there's a bit of break here and there. I get a bit sketchy. So I shall talk a little slower to make sure that everyone understands, just in case, because the internet's like having a moment. Maybe it's demonically possessed. All right. So firstly, we'll start to look at, okay, how does somebody go from looking like this to looking like this? Can there be other explanations for someone to have disintegrated in such an intense way? It's intense. Now, of course, for most of us who know, that's Annalise Michel. Within I think maybe a year or two of her going through her situation, which we'll obviously explore later on in this particular presentation. But it's intense capture of how someone can actually disintegrate from one end to the other. All right.
Okay. Sorry about this, guys. Sorry about this, guys. It appears hell has not frozen over, but Beth has. Beth, can you hear me?
I can. I'm back in the room.
Excellent. We lost you for a moment there. Cool.
Oh my gosh, what part was I up to? My word. I'm ever so sorry.
No, no problem at all. We just, it suddenly all went quiet. So can anyone remember the last word that was spoken?
That's unusual for me.
Carry on. Go back, Beth, and carry on. Sorry about that. I'll shut them now.
All righty, that's all good. I'm glad I was able to get back into the room, as we say. So I should go back to sharing my delightful screen. Okay. It's normal to be possessed. I love it. So share screen. All right. So we're going to demonic possession and what actually is it. So that. Here, apologies, beautiful people. So, what is it? I mean, sorry about this. Wonderful. So, demonic possession, what is it? What are demons? So that's the first thing we'll need to look at. Demons are fallen angels, according to the Bible, who have been cast out of heaven to earth for eternal torment. Sounds like a great gig, doesn't it? The word exorcism comes from the Greek words ek and the verb horkizo, which means I cause someone to swear, and refers to putting a spirit or demon on oath or invoking a higher authority to bind the entity in order to control it and command it against its own will. Now, I've watched movies before where it's like, I cast thee out. And you're like, that's great. But what they fail to actually tell you is you can't actually just cast a demonic entity out. And it needs to be bound to something. So if you ever see a movie and it's like, I cast thee out, it's gone. It's like, well, kind of, yes, but yeah, there's that little caveat there. It needs to be bound to something. So for myself, I will never be able to attend an exorcism because of my non-belief within Christian or Catholic beliefs. And I'll be considered a risk. So to attend an exorcism, they believe that whatever is cast out will then come to me because I'm not strong enough to deal with anything potentially negative. So it's, that's one thing to keep in mind. So when they say, I cast the house, like, it's got to be bound. So there you go, a little golden nugget there for you. So again, this is brief history, and I'm talking like hundreds of years of history, probably in about two slides, but we'll go through it. So references to demonic possession go back as far as the 2nd century. Now, that's from my own research that I was able to find. The Ritual Romanium is the priest's service manual containing the only form of exorcism rite sanctioned by the Roman Catholic Church, which was first written in 1614. Really to keep in mind. The Middle Ages saw a revival of ancient superstition and demonology. So then, of course, that makes us think, well, why would it be the Middle Ages? Like, we're kind of trundling along and everything's kind of okay. It's tumultuous at this time, but why the Middle Ages? Why that time? So we think of, the Black Plague. We had Viking invasions. We had the church that was like literally associated with so many problems at the time with sin and divine punishment. And now this is very potent now, more than ever in the last 12 months. Saying bless you when someone sneezed was, obviously, was signs to make sure, that person, first sign of sneezing was because of the plague. Very few people survived the plague, and it was believed that blessing might actually help them. People began covering their mouths and noses when they sneezed to avoid passing the plague on to others, and also to stop their soul actually from escaping from their open mouths. Imagine saying that in COVID times. So blessing sneezes also actually helped find the soul back to the person that actually sneezed as well, and actually escaped. So of course, then later on, demonic exorcisms decreased by the 18th century, but then the frequency increased by the 20th century. All right, okay, we've got a bit of a change here. Why a decrease of exorcisms in the 18th century? Why suddenly now it starts to decrease? Advancements in medicine. It took away the superstitions. So say, for instance, again, this is ironic, washing your hands helps, hand space here in the UK. It literally was that. But back in the 18th century, it's just a simple act of hygiene actually stopped a lot of what was happening. So even changing the water supply to a town with cholera would actually stop the disease falling through to everybody. And that was something that originally would have been attributed to something quite negative, or a negative entity or something bad happening that someone's brought in. Is the reason why people are dealing with this particular situation. But what's really interesting is in the mid 20th century, why does it pick up? We've got science, we know science. It's, we're way advanced by then considering the 18th century, what's going on. So again, it's more than likely to do with movies. And the movie The Exorcism, for those who know, Exorcist. And also there was the growing interest of Satanism in California at the time as well. So it started to rebuild. All right, does exorcism exist in other cultures? You betcha. It certainly does. So it's not just the good old Christian Catholic faiths, it's actually all different faiths that have actually experienced this and have actually deal with it as well. So we've got Hindu, Hindus, beautiful people. One of the things they do is actually put salt sticks in between your fingers as a way to actually make you uncomfortable. They burn manure, pig manure as well. That smells fragrant. Pulling your hair is something as well, and actually using copper coins as an offering. So generally in lots of other different faiths, making the body really, really uncomfortable was a way to actually say, well, if the body's uncomfortable, then the demonic entity inside you, or the negative entity inside you, is also uncomfortable as well. We've got Islamic as well. Now, this is interesting because only recently I was listening to a podcast where nothing in the Quran says anything about demons, but speaks of the jinn. And the jinn's not negative, it's playful, but in an annoying way. So, but they do have their ways in which they actually eradicate that particular entity from a person as well. In Shamanic traditions, they look at it in a very different way too, to alleviate somebody from a negative instance. They'll actually go into a trance. What they believe is if you have a negative entity inside you, your soul is elsewhere. So you've got a negative entity here, your soul's floating about. They will go into a trance, they will find your soul and they will bring it back to you. And then you come out and you're better, which I think is way better than having all the physical stuff going on, let's be honest. And I'll speak about that soon. So there's Islamic as well. We've got Jewish. Apologies for the picture. It was the best one I could get. It was terrible. Sorry, apologies for that as well. And of course, we have here, which is Buddhist. Now, a lot of people think that Buddhist faiths are very peaceful. Of course, they're very peaceful culture, very peaceful religion. But there's actually more Japanese Buddhists exorcists than there are actually Catholic exorcists or people who perform that from a Protestant perspective as well. But I think it's probably more down to population issue or problem, depending. So Buddhist exorcism, majority of them actually, they read the scriptures to a person. So as you can see, if you can, with somebody obviously lying down there, there's a man with a stick there as well. They burn beautiful incense, special incense, specifically just for that particular sort of ceremony. The wooden staff that he's got there has actually got metal rings tied to it. And when he hits the stick on the ground, the rings give a sound that is apparently quite, negative entities don't like it. In some traditions also, they find that, fasting a person, so making sure that they're fasting, bathing in extremely cold water. I couldn't think about that after the winter we've just been through, or slapping the skin of a possessed person as well. So again, it's literally focused on making the body physically uncomfortable, which means the spirit, a negative spirit within it, will actually be uncomfortable as well. So what are the common features of possession? Now, for me, I've had to originally, from a visual perspective, I'm a visual learner, I've had to think about it from movies, from Hollywood, which is really not that accurate, but from that perspective, that's the line I've had to go through because, again, I'm not able to attend an exorcism. So we'll do a snapshot of physical and we'll do a snapshot of psychological, parapsychological. So physical, we've got convulsions and fits, fainting, facial structural changes, so the pulling of the jaw, vocal intonation changes, so it's that real guttural growl that goes on, Sudden appearance of lesions too, that's another. We've got superhuman strength and levitation. I've got my thoughts about how that works, but we can talk about that later, or if anyone's got any questions on that as well. And then we've got parapsychological. So we've got erased personality, so like they were not themselves at all, erased memories. A lot of the time, people who have gone through an exorcism will not remember any of it and come out and not be none the wiser of what's actually gone on. Xenoglossia, I often joke the fact that sounds like an expensive cosmetic line, but it's not. It's actually the knowledge of a language without actually having been studied before previously. So there is actually a term for it that and actually can happen to people. And even accents as well, I think also can also fall under that. We've got controlled by a demon, so the person feels controlled by a demon. Obsession is in there. Obviously, suicide ideation, sadly, is in there as well. Blasphemous rage and aversion to holy relics. So normally, when I do this in person, I have a demonstration. And normally I would take the slide out. So I thought, you know what, this time I'm going to describe it. So normally I have 3 people that come up from the crowd, and I have someone who's the possessed person, the priest, and the priest's helper person. And what I do is I have somebody lay down, and I have the priest lean over and say, "Are you all right? No, sorry, how are you feeling? How are you feeling?" And I have them say it 10 times, but the person that's lying down, that's the possessed person, will say, "I'm fine." And people think, what is this woman on? So there is a reason. How are you feeling? I'm fine. How are you feeling? I'm fine. And this goes on 10 times. And then I say to the person possessed, I said, "How are you feeling?" She goes, "The pressure." He says, "The pressure to say that something is happening." That in alone in itself can just a little bit, just that little bit. It's a very, very simple demonstration, and very, very simple, but people are waiting. You're in a room and you're feeling okay, but there's expectation in the room about, well, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? Are you feeling all right? Are you feeling all right? Well, and sometimes people may feel compelled to say, "Well, no, I don't. I'm feeling just a bit weird. I don't know." The pressure of that as well. So it's to demonstrate sometimes that it's a polite peer pressure, if you want to call it. So often there is support for a hypothesis that when perceiving strange events, they would follow a predictable pattern. Just this alone could affect the interpretation of these events. So bias could actually influence the potential psychological explanations for people's experiences, like the known example of the devil within religions, and how that may influence experiences or a retelling of experience. So already that person's on a journey that they haven't had before, sort of thing. It's like they are already influenced by their surroundings, regardless of what may be happening or not. So that we really, our brains are built to survive. And fear is an extremely strong emotion that can change so many things within ourselves. And just being aware of that is really, really important. All right, so we're going to look at mental health aspects of impossession, but we're going to block it down. So the first one is psychological. So it's bias, belief, and suggestion. So generally, from that perspective, when we're looking at possession, there's some aspects for that as well. We've got psychiatric, so that's kind of more the chemical side of it instead of the belief and sort of feeling side of it. This is more the actual chemical side of it. We've got DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, which is actually a newer term for what people commonly have known as multiple personality disorder. There's schizophrenia, which a lot of people may feel that would be fitting more so than when it comes to psychiatric side of it, and also people may feel they are demonically possessed. And PPT, which is not PowerPoint presentation, it's actually pathological possession of trance. So, and that is actually something that is a particular term which explains a lot about what people may feel they're possibly going through, which they may not be diagnosed with. Okay, so to break it down further again, we've got trance and possession state disorders. So DID, dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder. Now, this is the general definition of it. It's a person taken over by 2 or more identities. It's gaps in remembering everyday events. Personalities have power over a person's behavior, hypothesized to evolve during a traumatic, neglectful, and or abusive early childhood. Generally, that's what this stipulates as such. DIDs also, and PPT actually fall under DID. So trust me, it'll make sense in a minute. PPT, pathological possession trance, is a component of DID, and the alternate identity or identities in PPT are attributed to possession of an external spirit, power, deity, or of a person, which is supernatural, rather than an internal personality state. So that's the biggest difference with this. So if you had to break them both apart again, DID means you're taking on a personality of someone that's around, alive, you and me, but PPT is actually something that you believe is taken from a supernatural perspective. That's the biggest key difference with this. There's complete trance, unresponsive, talking in a different voice, made feelings, the inability to speak or move, loss of control of actions, loss of awareness of surroundings, insensitivity to pain, and loss of personal identity, profound unresponsiveness, or insensitivity to environmental stimuli. So you can start to see bit by bit the similarities. Like that is a lot of what people report who feel they're demonically possessed will actually say that I didn't feel anything. I have that superhuman strength. I didn't know what was going on when I woke up. Speaking in a different voice, that different tonal voice. I've got some of the audio recording. I think it's even on YouTube, but they've got some music behind it. But Annalise Michelle's part of her actual exorcism, and her grustle, growling voice and talking in her way was quite shocking. Definitely shocking in the 1950s. So you can only imagine the pain it would have gone through having to speak like that. But there was the ability to do so. And this actually comes from a possibility of it coming from something like PPT. And of course, we go from neurological, which is kind of obviously more like the physical part. So we've gone from behavior, the chemical part, this is the physical part. So the physical parts of the brain with possibility of this being Tourette syndrome. Yeah, blasphemous rage could possibly fall under that. And definitely with seizures. Annalise Michelle had horrible seizures. Back then it was called grand mal, I think it is. And she would drop to her knees, which was genuflections. And she dropped to her knees while she was having her seizures. And she dropped to her knees so much that the cartilage actually wore away in her knees. So she actually had to be carried around in the last weeks and months of her life. So, but of course, from being around a very strongly religious family, they, without the knowledge of this, would have seen it as her wanting to salvage herself and pray. So again, it is part of this particular type of seizure, epilepsy. All right, so hopefully the video works here. I have dodgy times with video and internet connection, as we have already experienced. So I'm going to see how this will go. Hopefully, if you don't hear the audio, even the video might just be enough. But again, for those who may be a bit sensitive, may not be the best time to be watching. But for those who can sit through it, by all means, I encourage that as well.
Pretending to be a Christian, but is a wolf in sheep's clothing. What is his mission here among the people of God? Can darkness be instead of light? No.
So we get a bit of an idea of this particular person going through a situation like that. And again, in a situation where you're surrounded by so many people wanting to help, and it doesn't necessarily mean that people want to harm another person. Absolutely not in any way, shape or form. It's the reasons for people being there in that particular situation is to want to help a person or see somebody who they feel is in trouble. But again, in a crowd that people don't know of his previous history. Maybe he has something else going on mentally that has been undiagnosed, or maybe it has been diagnosed. He's gone to this particular setting and he's around people that see things on a certain level. So again, I give this talk, and it has been within a crowd, say, what are your thoughts? What do you think? And a lot of people say, well, we don't feel that, in our opinion, generally, that he is possessed. There's obviously, for a lot of people generally looking at this, there's something else going on that may not necessarily be about demonic possession. I mean, if someone was smacking me on the top of the head and I'm surrounded by people, I would probably react a little differently. But again, we don't know his background. We don't know where he's come from. We don't know why he's there as well. So it's so many shades of grey when it comes to this particular type of topic, and particularly with something as heavy as demonic possession. So we're going to look at another video. Oh, hang on. There we go. Another video. Case 2. So again, interesting case there as well. A lot of people, when I've given this talk, have thought that is more than likely generally not demonic possession. More than likely it's probably just coming down from something. But again, if somebody comes in thinking he's demonically possessed and not having a broader mind about the possibilities of something else going on, would look at that and think it's a very strange behavior that's happening, and we're not really sure. But again, the first thing is the fact that he's coherent somewhat, he's actually somewhat understanding. But again, to me, for myself personally, I would look at that and think he's definitely probably dealing with a drug redraw of some sort with regards to his situation. But again, it's you can see the body of demonic possession is real. Well, possibly, but let's just look at this guy and actually give him a little bit of doubt there, in the sense that there might actually be something else going on that could be more logically explained. And we've got case number 3. Yeah, this one's pretty intense. So yeah,
Okay, Beth, we haven't got any sound coming through, I'm afraid.
Yep, okay. Yep, all right. All good. You finished it up? Okay. So, as you can imagine, it is pretty intense and it goes on. Somebody's suffering in that way, it can be hard to watch at the best of times. Again, this is something that's repeated over and over. It's almost like an ingrained behavior, possibly, as again, we don't really know what's really happening. Again, we don't have the background of what's going on. We've only been told through the documentary itself, but from looking at it from an outsider's point in, you know, it could be a learned behavior. We don't really know. There could be all sorts of stuff going on that's happening from, as I said, you know, it could be xenoglossia, it could be all sorts of things happening. Again, she got a very guttural growl, which was very hard to hear, you know, from an empathetic perspective. So it can be quite intense. But yeah, it's intensive in that way. But again, we as people who investigate possible paranormal phenomena, including something that could be demonic or demonic possession, we need to be as objective as possible. There could be all sorts of factors going on there. I'm not sure if you could see in the kitchen, there's lots of crosses. So again, the family are very strong of faith, which is wonderful. But then again, we're not really sure if there's something missing that has been misdiagnosed in some way. Generally with schizophrenia, it is something that is diagnosed from an early age, usually early teenage years. So if it's something later on, it's quite rare. But in this kid's situation, she seems quite young. But you know, hopefully she's still around. She's okay after having to endure any of that. But again, it's food for thought. Now, hang on a second. The next one. So we'll stop it there. I won't go into it. But again, that progresses a little bit, and then there are gentlemen that take her off, and then somebody gets upset with her and actually harms her physically, and then they get taken away. So it's but again, we don't know the background of her mental state. Is that something is she demonically possessed, or could something else be going on? She was looking through her bag. She was looking quite nervous. It's almost like she knew what was coming in some way. It was something made her feel uncomfortable, and she was in a public place and she couldn't find a way to actually get herself out of it. That's how I've seen it myself personally. When I've had talks like this before, a lot of people feel that it may be possibly, again, drug induced. I think there might be something else from a mental health perspective that was going on, because she seemed agitated way beforehand and then just sort of snapped. And I can see the eyes, obviously her eyes were moving, her jaw was moving as well. And she obviously was not in a great place. And again, obviously that guy there was just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time with that particular situation. So summaries with the whole today's talk or tonight's talk. Psychological things to keep in mind when it comes to possible alternative explanations of demonic possession is bias. How much that really does affect a situation, being in a room, surrounded by people, the belief and the suggestion of people wanting to help at the same time, actually further compounding it. It's also like, as I say, for those like myself as a mental health first aider, you don't further compound somebody's possible audible and hallucinations. You're adding fuel to the fire, if you say so. We've got psychiatric, which is trance and possession state disorders. That's a really, really important part to keep in mind as well, because there are actually other explanations for people going through something like this. Schizophrenia is a very more general, well-known explanation for something like this, but like I said, usually it's something that is diagnosed early on in the person's life. Dissociative identity disorder, again, there's people who literally can be 10 different people in one day, and dissociative states as well. And of course, neurological, we've got Tourette's and seizures in there as well. So things to keep in mind as a bit of a snapshot with when it comes to this. There are other explanations, something that is quite intense. Like, again, those videos can be intense to watch. But at the end of the day, there actually could be other explanations, which is not demonic possession. And I think as investigators or people interested in the paranormal and or anything that's possibly in a demonic sense, we need to keep our minds open, and we need to actually research all aspects, because going through a possible, going through an exorcism is extremely intrusive in itself. It's very forcible. I mean, people have died going through it. And Annalise Michelle was one of those people where she was surrounded by people who wanted the best for her, but at the same time didn't understand her actual physical and mental health at the time, and unfortunately had passed away and literally died from malnutrition from it, because they starved her so much. Well, she starved herself as well by being in that particular situation. So knowledge is power, as we say. And thank you very much for sitting through what is a very light and fluffy topic of demonic possession and possible alternative